What happens when a comedy legend sits down for what should be a lighthearted chat and finds himself in the crosshairs of a host who seems determined to tear him apart on live television? It only took one comment about cancel culture for the entire interview to spiral into chaos, ending with security escorting one of Britain's most beloved comedians off the set while millions watched in disbelief. The ITV studios were buzzing with anticipation. Ricky Gervais, fresh off his latest stand-up special, had agreed to appear on Loose Women for what was supposed to be a friendly conversation about his career, his comedy, and his upcoming projects. The audience settled into their seats. The cameras rolled, and the familiar theme music faded as Denise Welch introduced the guest of the day with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Welcome back, everyone. Now, our next guest needs no introduction. He's known for his controversial comedy, his outspoken views, and his ability to offend just about everyone. Please welcome Ricky Gervais. The audience applauded as Ricky walked onto the set, waving and smiling. He took his seat on the famous purple sofa, settling in between Denise and fellow panelists Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore. The energy in the studio felt electric, though perhaps not in the way the producers had hoped. "Thanks for having me," Ricky said, his voice warm and genuine. "Great to be here." Denise leaned forward, her posture already confrontational. "So, Ricky, let's get straight into it. Your comedy has been called mean-spirited, punching down, and frankly, bullying. How do you respond to critics who say you've gone too far?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the gentle opening question anyone had expected. Ricky's smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "Well, I think context matters in comedy," he began carefully. "I've always believed that you can joke about anything. The target of my jokes is usually ignorance, hypocrisy, or people in power. I've never punched down at vulnerable groups." "Haven't you, though?" Denise interrupted, her voice sharp. "I've seen your material. You make jokes about trans people, about disabled people, about minorities. That sounds like punching down to me." Kay Adams shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable with the aggressive tone. "Denise, maybe we should let him explain his approach to comedy." "No, I think this is important," Denise cut her off. "We have a responsibility here to hold people accountable. Ricky comes on our show. He should be prepared to answer tough questions." Ricky took a breath, maintaining his composure. "I respect that you have concerns, but I think you're misunderstanding the nature of the jokes. When I talk about any group, I'm not attacking the group itself. I'm usually attacking attitudes towards them, or the absurdity of certain conversations around them. There's a difference between a joke and genuine hatred." "Is there?" Denise shot back. "Because I know people in those communities who feel genuinely hurt by your words. Does their pain not matter to you?" "Of course it matters," Ricky replied, his voice still calm but gaining an edge. "But comedy is subjective. What hurts one person might make another person from the same community laugh. I get messages all the time from people in the groups you're mentioning who tell me they appreciate that I'm not treating them like they're too fragile to be joked about." Nadia Sawalha interjected, trying to steer the conversation somewhere more constructive. "I think what's interesting is this debate about where the line is in comedy. Ricky, do you think there should be any boundaries at all?" "Thank you, Nadia," Ricky said, grateful for the more reasonable question. "Look, I think comedians should be free to explore any topic. Whether a joke works or not, whether it's funny or not, that's up to the audience to decide. But I don't think we should be in the business of telling comedians what they can and cannot talk about. That's a dangerous road." Denise let out a derisive laugh. "Dangerous? You know what's dangerous? Using your massive platform to mock vulnerable people. You're a millionaire, Ricky. You have all the power in the world, and you use it to what? Make trans people feel unsafe? Make disabled people feel like they're a punchline?" "That's not what I do," Ricky said firmly, his patience starting to wear thin. "You're completely misrepresenting my work." "Am I?" Denise's voice rose. "Or are you just uncomfortable being called out for once? You dish it out constantly. but you can't take it when someone challenges you. Jane Moore tried to intervene. I think we're getting a bit heated here. Maybe we should take a step back. No, Jane, Denise snapped. This is exactly the conversation we need to have. People like Ricky hide behind the excuse of comedy to say vile things. And then when they're challenged, they cry. Censorship. Ricky leaned forward, his voice steady but intense. I'm not crying anything. I'm simply trying to explain that you're fundamentally misunderstanding what I do. I don't say vile things. I tell jokes. There's a massive difference. Jokes at whose expense? Denise demanded. At everyone's expense, Ricky replied. I make fun of myself. I make fun of celebrities. I make fun of politicians. I make fun of all kinds of people and situations. That's what comedy is. If we start carving out groups that are off limits, we're essentially saying those groups are too weak to be treated like everyone else. That's actually more offensive. Oh, so now you're the defender of vulnerable groups? Denise's tone was dripping with sarcasm. How noble of you. Making jokes about trans people is actually helping them. Is that what you're saying? That's not what I said at all, Ricky responded, frustration creeping into his voice. You're twisting my words. I'm repeating your logic. Back to you, Denise shot back. And it sounds absurd because it is absurd. The audience was silent now, the tension palpable. Kay Adams made another attempt to redirect. Perhaps we could talk about Ricky's upcoming tour. I'm sure people would love to hear about... Why are we giving him a platform? Denise interrupted again. Seriously, why did we book someone who uses his comedy to hurt people? What message does that send? Ricky's jaw tightened. I think you're being incredibly unfair. You invited me here under the pretense of a normal interview, and instead you've ambushed me with accusations and mischaracterizations. This isn't a conversation. This is an attack. An attack? Denise's voice went up an octave. You want to talk about attacks? What about the people you attack in your specials? What about them? I don't attack anyone, Ricky said, his voice rising to match hers. I tell jokes. If you can't understand the difference, that's your problem, not mine. No, Ricky, it's your problem, Denise fired back. Because people are tired of it. People are tired of men like you, thinking you can say whatever you want without consequences. The world is changing, and you can't handle it. I can handle change just fine, Ricky replied, his jaw clenched. What I can't handle is being misrepresented by people who haven't actually paid attention to what I do. You're arguing against a version of me that exists only in your head. I've seen your specials, Denise countered. I've heard the jokes. And did you laugh? Ricky asked pointedly. Did you understand the context? Did you see who the actual target was? Or did you just look for things to be offended by? I didn't need to look, Denise said. The offensiveness was right there on the surface. The world is changing into a place where we can't have honest conversations without being accused of hatred, Ricky countered. Where everything is seen through the lens of who has more power or privilege. That's not progress. That's regression. That's easy for you to say from your position of privilege, Denise interjected sharply. Here we go, Ricky said, shaking his head. The privilege card. Yes, I'm successful. Yes, I'm well known. But that doesn't invalidate my perspective, and it doesn't mean I'm automatically wrong about everything. Nadia jumped in, her voice gentle but firm. I think both of you are making valid points, but maybe we're talking past each other. Denise, I understand your concerns about harmful rhetoric. Ricky, I understand your concerns about artistic freedom. Perhaps there's a middle ground. There's no middle ground with bigotry, Denise declared, crossing her arms. Ricky's eyes widened. Bigotry? Are you calling me a bigot on live television? If the shoe fits, Denise said coolly. The studio fell silent. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed to freeze. Kay Adams looked horrified. Jane Moore's mouth hung open. Nadia Sawalha reached out as if to physically intervene. That's outrageous, Ricky said quietly, dangerously. You've just called me a bigot in front of millions of people. Based on what? Your inability to understand satire? Based on your actions, Denise replied, not backing down. Based on the hurt you cause. Based on your refusal to listen to the communities you harm. I listen, Ricky said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I listen to all kinds of people, including people in those communities who actually get the jokes and appreciate them. You don't speak for everyone, Denise. And neither do you, she snapped, but at least I'm on the right side of history. Ricky stood up abruptly. I think we're done here. Oh, you're leaving? Denise's voice was triumphant. Can't handle a little criticism? This isn't criticism, Ricky said, unhooking his microphone. This is character assassination. You invited me here to smear me, and I'm not going to sit here and be called a bigot by someone who clearly has an agenda. Jane Moore finally found her voice. Ricky, please, sit down. Let's just take a breath and... No, Jane, Ricky said, though his tone with her was gentle. I appreciate you trying, but this is beyond salvaging. Denise has made it clear what she thinks of me, and I'm not going to stick around to be her punching bag. Denise laughed coldly. Look at this, everyone. The man who dishes it out can't take it. What a surprise. Ricky turned to her, his face red. There's a difference between dishing it out in a comedy special where people have chosen to watch and ambushing someone on a daytime talk show under false pretenses. You should be ashamed of yourself. I should be ashamed. Denise stood up as well, her voice getting louder. You're the one who needs to be ashamed. You're the one who makes a living off mocking vulnerable people. You're the one who thinks offensive equals funny. You're a bully, Ricky. A bully with a microphone. And you're a self-righteous hypocrite. Ricky shot back, his composure finally cracking. You sit here on your high horse, pretending to speak for communities you're not even part of, accusing people of bigotry when they simply disagree with you. You're not progressive, Denise. You're authoritarian. You want to control what people can say and think, and you use moral outrage as your weapon. The audience gasped. Kay Adams stood up, trying to physically position herself between them. Please, both of you, this is getting out of hand. It's already out of hand, Ricky said, stepping back. I'm leaving. Good, Denise spat. We don't want you here anyway. Nadia Sawala looked like she might cry. This is awful. This isn't what we do on this show. Maybe it should be, Denise said, still glaring at Ricky. Maybe we should be holding people like him accountable instead of giving them a platform to spread their harmful views. Ricky shook his head in disbelief. Harmful views. I tell jokes. Denise, jokes. I'm not spreading propaganda. I'm not inciting violence. I'm making people laugh. The fact that you can't see the difference is genuinely concerning. What's concerning is that you think making people laugh gives you a pass to say whatever you want, Denise retorted. It doesn't. You have a responsibility. My responsibility is to be funny, Ricky said. That's it. I'm not a politician. I'm not a social worker. I'm a comedian. And if you don't find me funny, that's fine. Don't watch. But don't sit here and accuse me of being a bigot because you don't like my jokes. Your jokes have consequences, Denise insisted. They embolden actual bigots. They make marginalized people feel unsafe. You can't just ignore that. I don't ignore it, Ricky said, exhaustion creeping into his voice. But I also don't believe that comedy should be sanitized to the point where it's meaningless. If we can only joke about things that offend nobody, there won't be any jokes left. Maybe some jokes shouldn't exist, Denise said coldly. That was the final straw. Ricky looked at her with something between pity and contempt. And maybe some talk shows shouldn't exist. Goodbye, Denise. He turned and walked toward the exit. The cameras followed him as he moved through the studio, past the shocked audience members, past the crew, scrambling to figure out what to do. Ricky, wait, Jane Moore called after him, but he didn't stop. Denise's voice carried across the studio. Run away, Ricky. That's what bullies do when they're confronted. Ricky paused at the door, turning back one last time. I'm not running away. I'm choosing not to engage with someone who's more interested in scoring points than having a real conversation. There's a difference. Is there? Denise challenged. Or are you just making excuses? You know what, Denise? Ricky said, his voice tired. I came here in good faith. I was prepared to have a real discussion about comedy, about boundaries, about all of it. But you weren't interested in that. You wanted a villain, and you decided I was it before I even sat down. So, congratulations. You got your moment. I hope it was worth it. Before she could respond, a producer rushed onto the set, speaking urgently to the panelists. The audience murmured, unsure what was happening. Kay Adams looked devastated. Nadia Sawalha was wiping tears from her eyes. Jane Moore stared at the floor. Denise remained defiant. We did the right thing. Someone needed to say it. Denise, Kay said quietly. That was too far. Way too far. Was it? Denise looked around at her colleagues. Really? We're going to defend him? We're not defending anyone, Jane said carefully. But that wasn't an interview. That was an ambush. And it wasn't fair. Fair, Denise laughed bitterly. What's fair about the platform he has? What's fair about the hurt he causes? He's a comedian, Nadia said, her voice shaking. Whether you like his comedy or not, calling him a bigot on live television. That's serious, Denise. That's really serious. He deserved it, Denise said firmly. Meanwhile, at the studio exit, Ricky was being stopped by security, not to escort him out, but to check if he was okay. One of the guards, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, put a hand on his shoulder. You all right, mate? The guard asked. Ricky managed a weak smile. I've had better days. Thanks for asking. For what it's worth, the guard said quietly, I think she was out of order. Yeah, well, Ricky sighed. It is what it is. Back on set, the producers were in full panic mode. The show had to continue, but the atmosphere was toxic. The audience looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and whispering to each other. Some looked angry on Ricky's behalf. Others seemed shocked by the whole spectacle. Denise, however, showed no signs of regret. She sat back down on the sofa, smoothing her dress and fixing her hair as if nothing unusual had happened. Well, she said to the cameras, that was certainly eventful. After the break, we'll be discussing whether comedians have gone too far in the name of free speech. Stay with us. As they cut to commercial, Kay immediately turned to Denise. What were you thinking? You just accused him of bigotry on live TV. I was thinking someone needed to hold him accountable, Denise replied coolly. That's not our job, Jane said firmly. Our job is to have conversations, not to attack guests. I didn't attack him, Denise protested. I challenged him. You ambushed him, Nadia said, still emotional. You invited him here, and then you ambushed him. That's not okay, Denise. Oh, please, Denise waved her hand dismissively. He can handle it. He dishes it out all the time. In a comedy special, Kay emphasized, where people know what they're getting. This is different. This is a talk show. People expect civility. Maybe civility is overrated, Denise said. Maybe we need to be more direct with people who use their platforms irresponsibly. The three other panelists exchanged looks. It was clear they were on a completely different page than Denise, but with the show still live, there wasn't much they could do about it in the moment. The commercial break ended, and they were back on air. The atmosphere on set was still tense, but they had to continue. Kay Adams took the lead, trying to salvage what was left of the show. Welcome back, she said, her smile strained. Obviously, that interview took an unexpected turn. Denise, do you want to explain your perspective? Denise sat up straight, looking directly into the camera. I think it's important that we hold people accountable for harmful rhetoric, even if they're famous, even if they're funny. Comedy doesn't give anyone a free pass to hurt people. Jane Moore cleared her throat. I think it's also important to note that there are different perspectives on this. Many people enjoy Ricky's comedy and don't find it harmful. This isn't a black and white issue. Some things are black and white, Denise insisted. Bigotry is black and white. But who decides what constitutes bigotry? Nadia asked gently. That's the question, isn't it? We all have different thresholds for what we find offensive. If something hurts vulnerable people, it's offensive, Denise stated flatly. That's not complicated. Kay sighed. But vulnerability is also subjective. What one person finds hurtful, another person from the same community might find empowering or funny. Then those people have internalized oppression, Denise said dismissively. The other three panelists looked at her in disbelief. Even some audience members could be heard murmuring their disapproval. Denise, Jane said carefully, that's a pretty condescending thing to say. You're basically saying that anyone who disagrees with you is wrong or damaged. I'm saying that sometimes people don't realize when they're being harmed, Denise doubled down, and it's our job to point it out. No, Kay said firmly. It's not our job to tell people how they should feel. It's our job to have conversations, to present different viewpoints, and to let our audience make up their own minds. Denise looked frustrated. So, we're just supposed to give platforms to people who spread harmful ideas? We're supposed to have balanced discussions, Nadia said, not ambush guests who come here in good faith. He didn't come in good faith, Denise argued. He came to promote his tour, which is full of the same offensive material we were talking about. That was for the audience to decide, Jane countered. Not for us to prosecute him over. The debate continued, with the three other panelists clearly distancing themselves from Denise's approach. The audience was fully engaged now, some nodding in agreement with Kay, Jane, and Nadia, while others seemed to support Denise's hardline stance. What had started as a routine celebrity interview had devolved into a meta-conversation about cancel culture, free speech, and the role of talk shows in holding public figures accountable. But underlying all of it was the uncomfortable truth that a guest had been driven off the set by one panelist's aggressive questioning and outright accusation of bigotry. As the show wrapped up, there was no resolution, no neat conclusion, just lingering tension and the knowledge that what had happened would be talked about for days, possibly weeks to come. The credits rolled over shots of the panelists looking uncomfortable, the audience looking confused, and an empty space on the sofa where Ricky Gervais had been sitting just minutes before. Outside the studio, Ricky stood in the corridor, still processing what had just happened. His publicist rushed over, phone already pressed to her ear, no doubt fielding calls from journalists eager to get his side of the story. "Are you okay?" she asked, covering the phone's microphone. "Yeah," Ricky said, though he didn't sound entirely convincing. "Just wasn't expecting that." "Nobody was," she said sympathetically. "That was brutal." Ricky nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I should have seen it coming. The way she introduced me, the tone in her voice. I just thought, I don't know what I thought." "You thought you were doing a normal interview," his publicist said. "Anyone would have thought that. She completely blindsided you." "Well," Ricky said with a bitter laugh, "I guess that's good television, right? Drama, conflict, someone walking off. Probably great for ratings." "Probably terrible for you," his publicist said bluntly. "Calling you a bigot on live television? Ricky, that's serious. We might need to consider legal action." Ricky shook his head. No legal action. That'll just drag it out, make it bigger. I'll put out a statement, clarify my position, and move on." "Are you sure?" she asked doubtfully. "Yeah," Ricky said, sounding more certain now. "I'm sure. Denise can have her opinion. I don't agree with it, and I think the way she handled it was completely unprofessional, but I'm not going to sue her for having an opinion." His publicist looked like she wanted to argue, but thought better of it. "Okay, but we should get ahead of this. The internet is going to explode." "Let it explode," Ricky said tiredly. "People will pick sides. they'll argue, and in a week, everyone will move on to the next controversy. That's how it works now. He was probably right. In the age of social media and 24-hour news cycles, outrage was fleeting. But in that moment, in that corridor outside the studio where he'd just been publicly called a bigot, it didn't feel fleeting. It felt permanent, heavy, exhausting. Back inside the studio, as the audience filed out and the crew began breaking down the set, Denise sat alone on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. Already, clips of the interview were circulating online, and the reactions were mixed. Some praised her for standing up to Ricky, for holding him accountable, for not backing down. Others criticized her for ambushing a guest, for being hostile, for mischaracterizing his comedy. Kay, Jane, and Nadia had already left, their goodbye to Denise noticeably cool. A producer approached her cautiously. "Denise, we need to talk," the producer said. "About what?" Denise asked, not looking up from her phone. "About what just happened. That wasn't what we discussed in the pre-show meeting." "Things evolved," Denise said simply. "You called him a bigot," the producer said, emphasizing each word. "On live television, without any warning to us, to him, or to your fellow panelists. He deserved it," Denise maintained. The producer sighed deeply. Whether he deserved it or not isn't the point. The point is that this is going to have consequences. For him, for you, for the show. "Good," Denise said, finally looking up. "Maybe we need more consequences. Maybe people need to stop getting away with harmful rhetoric just because they're funny." The producer opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. There was clearly no getting through to Denise right now. She was convinced of her righteousness, certain that history would vindicate her stance. "We'll talk more tomorrow," the producer said eventually, "when everyone's had time to cool down." But even as she said it, she knew that cooling down wouldn't change anything. The damage was done. The interview was out there, archived forever on the internet, ready to be dissected and debated, and turned into think pieces and hot takes and ammunition for both sides of the increasingly heated culture war. In the makeup room, someone had left a television on, tuned to a news channel. Already, they were discussing the incident, with commentators weighing in on who was right and who was wrong, whether Denise had crossed a line, or whether Ricky deserved to be challenged so forcefully. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a take. And at the center of it all was an interview that had gone so spectacularly wrong that it would be remembered long after anyone could recall what else had been discussed on that episode of Loose Women. The studio lights were dimmed now, the space empty except for a few crew members and the ghosts of the confrontation that had just taken place. The purple sofa sat there, innocent and unchanged, bearing silent witness to one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. And somewhere in the building, Ricky Gervais was writing his statement, choosing his words carefully, knowing that whatever he said would be picked apart and analyzed. There was no winning, not really. Just different types of losing. But he'd been in this position before. He'd weathered controversies, survived backlashes, come out the other side. This would be no different. Or maybe it would be. Maybe calling someone a bigot on live television was a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Only time would tell.